Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Coaching the Bible. This is episode 210, season 4, episode 50. We are closing in on the end. I'm actually changing it up this week because I've been tinkering with the format over the course of, every year we sort of change the format. So I'm looking at changing the format again for the coming year. It keeps me excited. It keeps me innovative. It keeps me thinking. And so we're going to try to do something different this year, which is, and let me know, please, what you think. We're going to axe the win of the week and the learning of the week. And we're going to dive in and try to catch 3 ideas in a week in 15 minutes or less. It's a challenge for me. It's a challenge for me to cover a lot of different aspects of it, but also to get the point across in a manner that's meaningful, but also succinct, saving everybody time. And also my bigger goal ultimately is earlier in the week. Next week's episode, with God's help, will be the annual review. Amazing what you can do with ChatGPT in improving on a document. But that's for next week. So 210 this week. We're going to hit 3 ideas. We're going to call this Leadership for Tomorrow on Unity, Resilience, and Transition. Here we go. Leadership is not just about guiding the present, but empowering the future, uniting the community, and standing strong through uncertainty. That quote is mine. It's made up. It's based on this presentation. And again, the goal here is 3 principles, 5 minutes or less per principle, and we're going to get right to it. This week's session from Nitzavim Vayelech will show us how Moses, in his final days of leadership, exemplified these very principles. We'll explore how leadership transitions, how there is a sense of collective responsibility and resilience during uncertainty that comes together that creates incredible leadership impact for the future. Principle number 1, collective responsibility. We're going to try to go also in sequence of the portion of the week so that as you're reviewing the portion or you want to look it up, it doesn't get too lost for you. So principle number 1 is collective responsibility. This comes to us from Deuteronomy 29:9. Which is the idea that you're all standing here together before the Lord and you're entering into the covenant. The concept here of collective responsibility is that it doesn't belong to one singular person. It belongs to everyone. All of Israel is responsible for one another. We know that concept. We've heard that concept in a lot of different places. All of Israel is responsible for one another. It also really hits beautifully to a beautiful quote that's attributed to Martin Luther King Jr. We must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools. The reality is that you're always together. You can try to go it alone, and some people do, but you're always going to succeed more when you're working with others. It could be because other people are bringing in their own interests to drive that. That's fine, but there's also collective interest that comes to it as well. Again, that could be from a sense of covenant. That could be from a sense of obligation, whatever the case may be, but that's really the truth. And so the people standing here are led by a person, whether that's Moses or ultimately Joshua, but they're also responsible themselves. Each has a role. We'll talk more about that in just a moment as well. Here's a great example that actually fairly recent. Is a gentleman by the name of Marcus Rashford, who was a footballer in the UK, and he himself inspired widespread public support for free school meals, which led to policy change. He didn't do it on his own. He started the process. He galvanized and he rallied people, but he galvanized and he rallied people to their collective sense of responsibility and not just his collective sense of responsibility. There's another actual athlete by the name of J.J. Watt, who in the aftermath of a hurricane in the Houston area also took on massive personal responsibility, but also galvanized incredible communal responsibility as well. So then the practical side of this here is really important. How do you do this where you get collective responsibility? So number 1, really important to define everyone's role incredibly clearly. So everyone knows what their role is and, very importantly, how that role connects to the larger mission or the larger task at hand. And then part 2 of that is a weekly check-in where you're consistently and regularly checking in to see how that one idea, how that one person's role connects into it and how they're progressing towards that larger goal. And of course, always celebrating the small wins one step at a time into the next. How did I do with principle number 1? All right, 3+ minutes. I know the clock says 5 minutes, but in terms of actually talking about the principle, it's actually 3 minutes. So that's principle number 1, collective responsibility. Again, idea about leadership for tomorrow. Principle number 2 is resilience in the face of change. You have to step up in a space of uncertainty. And so here, biblical source is chapter 31, verse 6. The people are employed to be strong and courageous because God is with you. God goes with you. In other words, that time of transition is fraught with all kinds of fear, anxiety, tension, stress, possibilities, dangers, risks, all kinds of things. And so for a nation that has been accustomed to Moses for 40 years, now changing locations, now changing the structure of their society, and now also changing leaders, well, that's a lot to manage and to handle all at the same time. And so there's an appreciation that that is what's happening, and it's important to call that out, that that's what's going on, and it's okay. And God then is therefore calling them to, gird up and be strong and be courageous. You can do this, you can succeed, you can do hard things. That's an inside joke. You can do hard things, and you'll be able to get there ultimately. And so it's really important to sort of appreciate that the only way to be able to do that is not just the words of God, but also by having a real strong sense of resilience. And we'll talk about how resilience sort of works in just a minute. Again, we've talked about a lot of these principles before. The check here and the test here for me is to be able to develop these principles again, but also to develop them in less time and to go much further perhaps than we did in the past. And so the goal now for this coming year perhaps is 150 different principles that can be shared in the course of the 50 weeks plus together in Coaching the Bible Season 5. That's a plug. Okay, the clock hit 5 minutes, so now I'm going to restart the 5-minute clock, and I'm already inside principle number 2. So again, resilience in the face of change, stepping up in this space of uncertainty, not just the leader, but also the people. And here's a great quote that's attributed to Churchill, but is not by Churchill. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. I can see why someone would attribute that to Churchill. It's also, I think, been attributed to Lincoln. It's neither of the two. So that sense is that in these spaces of real crisis and risk, people standing up. So here's an example from the practical world. Whereas we had before Marcus Rashford, the footballer, here is an example we've talked about before, which is Howard Schultz when he led Starbucks through the 2008 financial crisis. He's an incredible CEO, tremendous things to learn from him in terms of leadership, in terms of style, obviously success. So how did he handle that as a leader in that moment? He handled it by focusing in on core principles and core values of the company and hyper zoomed in on those core things despite all the uncertainty that was around. By virtue of doing that, he was able to simplify the process for everybody. He was able to have people rally around things that they knew and that they were comfortable with. So even though they felt that maybe they were getting banged against the walls, like a lot of other people felt like during the financial crisis of 2008, they were able to sort of get through. I keep saying sort of, I'm going to have to work on that. You're going to have to get through even in that difficult time. So the practical side of this then is what I'll call resilience mapping. Number 1 is to really map out, lay out, you can write this out on a screen, on a piece of paper, where you feel that your company or your team or your family is uncertain or unstable at this moment. And then be clear what those things are. Don't just sort of list like some sort of difficult to understand principle. Get inside the weeds of what that uncertainty is. That'll help you get to the resilience part. Number 2 is then create a clear communication plan. Over-communicate your vision to the team to maintain direction during this space of uncertainty. So figure out what the plan is in terms of how you're going to attack each one, what the sequence and the progression may be for attacking these different uncertainties. and make that clear to everybody and be clear about what those roles are for everyone in that process. Number three in that is maintaining the core values. Ensure that all the decisions align with the core values of the company, of the team, of the family, to give the team a sense of stability and purpose. Again, going back to what you know and going back to what worked before doesn't always work, but can work and can simply, if nothing else, put people on stable ground so that they can be tough enough, strong enough to handle what is coming their way in the moment. And so relying on experience and the success in past experience is a real core idea within that sense of resilience. That is principle number 2. I still have time, but I'm going to reset the clock for 5 minutes here on principle number 3, which is leadership in transition, empowering the next generational leaders. So where the other parts are very much about leadership for tomorrow, that uncertainty and stepping up on uncertainty, and also the collective responsibility, of course, you still need someone who's going to lead. And that transition moment is incredibly dangerous, I think is no other way to say it. It's obviously the case. However one looks at just the example of January 6th in the United States, the transition of power in 2021, after that election between President Biden and former President Trump, that moment still resonates with people. That moment still sits with people the wrong way. And where other people may dismiss it, it was different than every other transition of power in that place. In Israel, the last time it changed over from the prior government to the current government they don't really like each other, and so it didn't go over so smoothly, and that has its impact on people. But it's also important to make the transition and to empower the people, and it's important, we talked about this before, that's sort of, I think, one of the undervalued accomplishments of Moses, and by extension, of course, God, is having the transition, the succession plan in place, and the handoff, simple, smooth handoff of power from Moses to Joshua here. So this is chapter 31, verse 7. Moses summons Joshua, and he says to him the same words that were said to the nation, "Be strong and courageous, for you shall bring the people into the land." Moses is telling Joshua publicly, strengthening him in public and strengthening the public in public, so that they should feel strong and resolute and confident that they can transition into this next moment, into this next generation, into this next chapter in their existence as a people, and be successful in that. Joshua has his role. Everyone else has their roles to play as well, like we talked about in the first idea here as well. Here's a great quote for this one from Simon Sinek, who we quote a lot during Coaching the Bible. Makes a lot of sense. Leadership is not about the next election. It's about the next generation. And so you see this succession plan where it works and where it doesn't work. And I mentioned early on in Coaching the Bible, when I talked about succession, about Walmart and the handoff from Sam Walton to the next leader. You see it more recently in the transitions at Microsoft from Bill Gates to Satya Nadella. It was a very smooth and powerful experience, not just for each of those two people, but also for the company itself and the success that it bred over the course of time. Public endorsement, public sense that this is the right person for the next generation. This is how you do it. And so the practical part of this then is to have a succession plan in place. Right away, when I talked about succession the first time, I talked about the idea that the moment you have success, you should start thinking about succession. That's not mine. I learned that from somebody else. Here, it's important to appreciate who are the people around you who have great potential for leadership, even if it's not yet their role as leaders right now. You just either sense it, or you see from their performance, or you see from their interactions with other people, there's leadership in there. Then, once you identify those people, mentoring them by giving them space in the room during higher level decision-making processes, giving them slightly more difficult projects, maybe giving them a small team to start working with to see what's possible. And as it progresses further, then giving them that sense of that public endorsement that they are leaders, that they can lead, and to build their confidence and to reassure the team and to build the confidence of the team. So what you then get from this 15 plus minute presentation, but the presentation around the principles was less than 15 minutes, is 3 really cool, really good leadership principles in a much shorter period of time than I'm usually taking. Collective responsibility, that's 1. 2, resilience in the face of change. And 3, leadership in transition. To close out this week's Coaching the Bible, again, here's that quote: leadership is not just about guiding the present, but empowering the future, uniting the community, and standing strong through uncertainty. Moses demonstrated that to the people. He demonstrated that to Joshua. He demonstrated that for all generations to come. And we as leaders are called to do the same. That is Coaching the Bible for this week. I wish you all an incredible week ahead and look forward to sharing with you the annual review next week.